Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Lab. Tonight it's just me, Lou Follenkamp. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to have a discussion on exercise variation and modification in physical therapy, right? So as dedicated professionals in this field, we need to understand the pivotal role for personalized exercise plans, especially in terms of enhancing athletic recovery and then also getting them back to like the highest level of performance possible. So we're going to talk about a few different principles today, and we're also going to talk about, how to guide effective exercise variations and modifications as we tailor it to our individual patient's needs. So kind of before we kind of start with this, what I want to talk to you guys about, I got a few different sections here. Man, allergies are not good right now. But before we start kind of talking about exercise regimens and then also why this exercise variation modification is so like important. It's crucial to like take our objective measures or like in your assessment of your evaluation, but their current condition, right? Kind of noting the deficits, any previous history of injuries, the limitations that's keeping them back from being 110% back on the field. So like joint mobility, muscle performance, contraindications, maybe they're post-surgical. uh, we want to have a very good overview of the patient's overall capability, let alone their deficits, so we can make good decisions on the exercises that we're going to be utilizing for them. Um, so why is variation so important, right? So as a physical therapist, we've identified these deficits, right? Now, is there one way to go about addressing these deficits? No, right? There's a whole infinite toolbox of exercises, and having that variation and having the ability to utilize different forms of exercise to address this kind of lets you approach it from a multitude of different perspectives. Plus, if you think about it, if you do the same thing repetitively over and over and over again, um, it's boring. It's very boring. And so that's why having this, it allows you to kind of add a little spice into your rehab program so that it makes it you as a therapist can also enjoy your day too. And the patient will actually have a little bit, maybe a little bit more buy-in with you so that they'll enjoy their session each time because they know it's going to be something different. The second part of this, right, is like we want to think about like specific conditions, right? So if I have a post-surgical patient and I'm limiting them too much with a particular movement, how could I go about maybe, safely modifying this and taking into consideration soft tissue healing rates? Um, Also, like maybe if there's a surgical protocol you have to follow, staying within the scope that maybe the surgical or the surgeon is going to allow for, let alone what is safe for the patient. Um, so this can include a variety of different things. So like in terms of like post-op ACL, I could reduce the range of motion. I could utilize weight bearing or non-weight bearing alternatives to movement. So like training the quad with like maybe a sit to stand, or maybe just doing a seated long arc quad. Like there's a lot of different options in order to address the same issue in terms of quadricep strengthening. I like to work in kind of like a pain-free to maybe a little bit of a mild pain, but nothing obviously excessive. But as they kind of take to that movement, I can gradually progress that, make sure it's tolerated, and then also ensure that there's a safe kind of like progressive overload. Uh, just makes the rehab process way more fun. So I just said progression, right? So progressing it, gradual progressive overload, right? So embracing progressive overload is so important, because if you're constantly utilizing the same band resistance and the same weights, you're never going to see an improvement. So that's why as we start doing this, we want to be mindful of like their overall movement patterns, but then we want to make sure that we're gradually increasing the loads that we utilize so that they can make progressions overall in the movement that you're trying to address. So for example, if you don't necessarily have a whole lot of improvements utilizing that red band, maybe start adding in weights to it. You could do like weights and band movements. So for example, the back squat. If they hit like a plateau and maybe you can't add excessive load yet, maybe you can change where they're hitting that deficit, um, such as adding a band, and then they get hit in the mid-range of the movement when ascending out of the squat. So that's one form of that. Maybe they can't go all the way down into depth. And so then I could incorporate a box and I could reduce the range of motion so that they can sit all the way down to that point, and then I could have them stand back up. So I could reduce the amount of time, or I could increase the amount of time between the eccentric and then moving into the concentric portion of the movements. So you don't really have to, break the bank on this. I mean, you can take a variety of simple movements and you can just modify slightly and change the challenge drastically. Um, don't think too hard. Don't beat yourselves up on this. I've had many student physical therapists who are like, I ask, what would be, give me 5 different variations for this same movement. And sometimes they look at me and they're like, man, I don't know if I can think of 3. And it's like, just, write them down, start a journal, or start putting them down and whatever you keep tabs of exercise wise. Maybe you have a journal or a little thing that you write down your exercises in for yourself. I mean, start putting down modifications that you use for your own training. Maybe you can even apply it with your patients. That's just a little something that I do with myself. So the other thing is you want to start thinking about movement patterns, right? So like how I can start taking them from the simple isolation movements and start gradually moving them more into the compound movements, right? So I started with more of like the compound movements. I could have a variety of different muscle groups being worked all in the same session then. So maybe you have that patient who's gotten really good at doing a long arc quad. Maybe we do start doing sit to stand so that we can progress that even further. Just working on whole neuromuscular like re-education, coordinating the movements of the hip hinge and the knee bend all at the same time. Like one of my favorite things is when people are like, "Oh yeah, my surgeon told me not to squat anymore." It's like, did you stand up out of a chair? Well, guess what? You sit a squat. So we can definitely integrate that into your therapy program. Uh, it's always funny to see the lights kind of come on. They're like, oh crap, this man's trying to kill me. So how do we go about making safe adjustments? Uh, I'd have to say you're going to be monitoring their progress regardless. I mean, that's the whole point of our objective section with each session, let alone reevaluations, is to see how is our exercise prescription progressing them towards exercise modification, or maybe when it's appropriate to progress a phase of their surgical rehab. So that's some of the fun stuff about this is that we're constantly monitoring them and we're adjusting their exercise regimen so that we can kind of fine tune it. I mean, you can adjust the intensity, you can adjust the volume. We can incorporate, maybe we go from bilateral to unilateral challenges. Um, but that's why you have to I mean, as much as it is about documentation and getting your documentation as a physical therapist, you want to make sure you're getting away from the technology and you're actually connecting with your patient and seeing those fine little tunes or fine little things that we need to fine tune so that they can continue to make progress. But then there's also that patient buy-in uh, portion of that too. So like you can kind of work together to progress towards their goal. Um, I've always had, a soft spot where you kind of see the lights kind of turn on when they make that connection of, oh, I can do this. Like, this is going to be so fun. And then it's like, okay, let's add 5 pounds. And they go, oh, crap, not so great anymore. But I don't know. Like, I love getting, text messages from my patients that are like, dude, I just snatched like 135 and it wasn't painful anymore. Like, there is something to this reverse hyper that I'm utilizing now and actually progressing my lower back strengthening. Or, we worked on my hip mobility and now I can sit in a catcher stance and it doesn't bother me. So the big thing for you guys to kind of take away from this is that exercise variation modification lies in our ability to balance the individual needs, promoting the spice in your rehab programs, right? And then also adapting to the ever-changing patient condition. So by tailoring this like every single session to their unique requirements, we're not only like facilitating like a successful rehab process, but we're also going to lay the foundation for like a long-term and successful rehabilitation process. Um, so if you guys ever have any questions or you guys have like that case that you guys just need to talk about, I am always here if you ever want to talk about this. I mean, this goes for my UD students. This goes for, some of the kids I've worked for or worked with over in the gym. I mean, I'm always here. My phone, I got it right here. I'm available if you need me. Feel free to reach out. You want to talk through something? I'm always game. Even if you're struggling with a particular movement, you don't know why, send me a video. Like, let's have fun with this. I'm always uh, down to talk. All right. So obviously not a very long session, but I hope you guys enjoyed my little solo episode here, and we will see you guys in the next episode.